Welcome to Aussie Finance Chronicles, where money, history, and power collide right here down under. We're not your typical global finance channel. We offer a deep dive into Australian financial history and personal finance, told entirely through the lessons of the Aussies who paved the way. Our mission is simple: to ensure every Aussie is equipped with the knowledge to thrive financially. Today, we see the ASX as a single, powerful entity, a market worth over $2 trillion. But this unified powerhouse wasn't born overnight. Its story is one of fierce competition, crises, and a century-long struggle to forge a single nation out of 6 rival colonies. This is the story of the birth of the ASX. Before federation in 1900, Australia was a patchwork of competing colonies. New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland each had its own government, its own railway gauges, and its own ambitions. Naturally, they also had their own stock exchanges. This economic regionalism was the default setting. So how did these rivals overcome a century of competition to unite under a single market? The story begins with a flash of gold. The gold rushes of the 1850s flooded Australia with capital and ambition. Banks and insurance companies sprang up to manage this newfound wealth. And suddenly, there was a pressing need for a formal place to trade their shares. Melbourne, flush with gold money, was the first to formalize this, establishing its stock exchange in 1861. Not to be outdone, its bitter rival, Sydney, followed suit in 1871. The financial battle between these two great cities had begun. By the 1880s, Hobart, Brisbane, Adelaide, and Perth had all established their own local exchanges, each with its own rules and listings. Australia didn't have one capital market. AASX. This fragmentation was put to the test during the speculative boom of the 1880s, especially in marvelous Melbourne. British capital poured in, fueling a frenzy in property and mining stocks. The Melbourne Stock Exchange was the heart of the speculation, but when the bubble burst, it led to the great banking crash of 1893, paralyzing the local markets and exposing the dangers of their isolation. Even after Australia became a single nation in 1901, its stock exchanges remained stubbornly separate. This was a nightmare for growing national companies like BHP, which had to list their shares on 6 different exchanges just to be considered truly national. The need for cooperation was obvious. In 1937, a step was taken with the formation of the Australian Associated Stock Exchanges, or AASE. It was a loose alliance, an attempt to standardize some listing rules and commission rates. But true unification was blocked by the deep-seated rivalry between Melbourne and Sydney. Each feared losing its power. This fragile system was tested again in the 1960s with the Poseidon nickel boom. Wild speculation in small mining stocks, primarily on the Sydney and Perth exchanges, saw fortunes made and lost overnight. When the Poseidon bubble burst, it sent shockwaves through the system and highlighted the desperate need for stricter, unified regulation to protect investors from manipulation. The fragmented system was making it too easy for cowboys and crooks. By the 1970s and 80s, the world was changing fast. Global investors and the dawn of electronic trading made Australia's 6 separate exchanges look archaic and inefficient. The pressure was on. The federal government stepped in, establishing national regulatory bodies like the National Companies and Securities Commission. The message was clear: the fragmented structure had to end. The real breakthrough came with technology. In 1984, the 6 exchanges finally agreed to jointly develop the Computer-Assisted Trading System, or CATS. For the first time, brokers from different states could trade on a single electronic platform. It was the technological bridge that made unification possible. Of course, there was resistance. The exchanges were mutual organizations, owned by their member brokers. Unification threatened the power and profits of the dominant brokerage houses in Sydney and Melbourne. But the tide of history and technology was unstoppable. After intense political negotiation, the law was passed. On the 1st of April, 1987, the Australian Stock Exchange Limited, the ASX, was officially born. The 6 state exchanges were merged into a single national institution. It was a monumental turning point in Australia's economic history. The new ASX was immediately thrown into the fire. Just a few months after its creation, the Black Monday global market crash hit. But as a unified body, the ASX was able to manage the crisis far more effectively than 6 separate exchanges ever could have. The modernization didn't stop there. In 1998, the ASX made history by demutualizing and listing on its own board, becoming the first exchange in the world to do so. This transformed it from a members club into a competitive, profit-driven company. In 2006, it merged with the Sydney Futures Exchange, integrating derivatives and securities into a single powerhouse. Officially rebranding as the Australian Securities Exchange, underpinning all this is a system called CHESS, introduced in 1994. This electronic settlement system replaced paper share certificates and brought Australia's back-office processes up to world-class standards, making our market fast, secure, and reliable. Today, the ASX is the financial engine of our economy. It is how Big Four banks and giant miners like BHP and Rio Tinto access global capital. It's where the trillions of dollars from our superannuation funds are put to work, building the nation's wealth. The birth of the ASX wasn't just a corporate merger. It was a symbol of Australia's journey from a collection of squabbling colonies to a unified, confident nation. It's the legacy of a fragmented past, now financing a united future. Being Australian is a privilege. It's about dominating a great continent and wielding a great power. Let's learn our history to build a stronger, more prosperous Australia together. Thanks for joining me on Aussie Finance Chronicles. If you found this valuable, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.